All right. Hey, everybody. I'm Michelle Quirk. I am a pediatrician and a run coach and founder of Mindful Marathon. And today we have a Q&A with a very special guest. Dan, please introduce yourself.
Sure. So my name is Daniel Goldstein. I'm a orthopedic clinical specialist, physical therapist, and I currently work in South Carolina. And one of my specialties and one of my passions is really treating and training runners. And so Michelle and I met many moons ago. And so we both thought it would be a great idea to kind of meet virtually now that in 2020, that's the way to do it. And we can talk about some running topics.
Yeah, so I met Dan after an injury, not running really for all of the rehab and all of the knowledge that he's given me along the way. And I thought it would be a good idea to just kind of have a Q&A and have him answer some of our beginner athletes' burning questions, and hopefully I can answer some of them as well. So, all right, so we got a list of questions from our runners, and some of them, let's start with the very basics and maybe how to get started with running. So a question that I get a lot is, what type of sneaker should I get and what type of sneaker is best? And so what I usually do is tell people to go to their local running store, and with COVID, that has been a little bit of a challenge, although I know some places are doing like a virtual fitting, but I'm not sure if you have any light that you'd like to shed on that, Dan.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And I get that a lot. I get a lot of people that come to me and they ask, is this the best shoe for me? And the big things that I always tell them is that I'm not an expert in shoes.
Me neither.
I wear shoes every day, and I'm not in the business normally of recommending somebody to change shoes. So I do the same thing. I always tell them, go see their local running store, and they usually are the best option. One resource that I do want to share, however, that I really like and I go to a lot, Dr. Lee Cohen is a podiatrist in the Philadelphia area who happens to be the podiatrist for the Philadelphia Eagles. And on his website, they update every year different running shoes by type. So whether it be a stability shoe, a neutral shoe, a minimalist shoe. And so one of the things I always tell my runners, if they like a specific type of shoe, so if they're in a stability shoe and they want to stay in one, I always give them that list because it always does come out with the new list every year. And it is really a great resource. But again, I always tell people to go to running stores, and if they're going to change their shoe, one piece of advice that I always recommend is to wean into a shoe, especially if it's a new shoe. And so it means that you don't just throw on a new pair of shoes and run your regular distance in them, that you should really wean into them because your feet may not be used to the way that they feel, especially if they're a new shoe. And the other thing that I always mention, Michelle, is about changing shoes. And by that, I mean, after the first 100 miles or so, you lose about 10% of the cushion in a shoe. And so it's really important that runners change their shoes about every 300 miles. That's kind of our golden number, is 300 miles. And so I always tell people to write on the sole of their shoe either the date that they started or to log their mileage every week so that around 300 miles or so, you're getting into a new shoe. Do you usually tell people anything differently?
No, this is great advice. I usually tell people to try to keep track in whatever app they use to track their runs. So like in Strava or Nike Run, Garmin, all of that, you can log the shoe and attach it to the run. So that's what I do with mine. So I have 2 shoes in rotation, and then I just, after the run is over, I attach the run to the shoe that I ran in so that I know when it's approaching 300 miles.
Yeah, that's a great point. That's a great point. And for some people, it may just be changing out the shoe. And you can tell if you turn the shoe over, you can see how the tread is worn, which we as therapists use for different reasons, but you can tell if it's about time to put on a new
Yeah.
shoe.
Yeah.
So yeah, go for it.
Oh no, I was going to say, I like the advice of kind of a period of like breaking it in, because it does take a little bit of time to get used to a new shoe. I know I switched, from one brand to another brand, and it ended up being totally fine, but it can take a couple of weeks really to
Really,
feel comfortable in the shoe. Yeah.
yeah, it really can. So, so I always recommend people to wean into a different type of shoe, especially if you're going from a neutral shoe to a stability, or changing those different types around, not just brands of shoes, but different type of
Mm-hmm.
shoe. Um, so yeah, so that's a great point. And so, Michelle, when you have new runners, what is the biggest piece of advice that you give to your runners, especially your novice runners, your new runners?
I think the biggest piece of advice is probably to start low and go slow. Those are probably the two most important things. I think beginners always have a lot of really great positive energy and a lot of motivation to get started, which are wonderful things. They're really excited, but that excitement can lead into starting a little bit too much too fast, and can lead to overuse, injuries, and even burnout early on in the sport. So we're in it for the long term. So I always advise to, there's really no rush, right? Especially now, there's really no races on the calendar. So you can, do it the right way and start with a goal that is maybe seems small, but is realistic. So even if it means, 10 minutes a day for a couple of times a week, that's perfectly fine. And you can start really slow, like slower than you think you should go. I think that most people probably start out a little bit too fast. I'm not sure if you see that too, but I am often advising beginner runners and more experienced runners to slow down, and that can actually lead to more success.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's kind of when they usually enter, my realm and my part of the medical continuum is really these individuals that fall into, I call them the terrible twos. And it's, too much mileage, going too quickly, or doing too intense of an exercise or a workout. And so, it's really important to monitor your progression week to week, or run to run even, but looking at it in the long term, really looking week to week and making sure you're not progressing your mileage too quickly, or your intensity of your training too quickly. And allowing yourself time to kind of rebuild as well. So it's important, and I know you and I spoke about this a lot when we were together, but it's so important to cross train. And there's a lot of cliches in physical therapy, just as I'm sure there is with pediatrics as well. But, we always tell people that you should train to run, not run to train. And so it's important that you prepare your body as well as allowing it time to recover. And so I think it's really important, like you said, in novice runners and even experienced runners that may be just getting back into it after a period of time off, to make sure that they're training their body the right way, making sure they're getting the right nutrition, but also, giving their body enough time to regenerate, and giving yourself off days, and doing strength training as well as flexibility training, as well as that running training.
I think one of the things that you told me when I first met you was that runners only like to run. And I think that that is definitely true. But over time, especially after having a couple of injuries, I think I have certainly realized the importance of cross training and strength training and rest days, recovery. And really, rest and recovery is just as important as the training. But I know, it's hard for people to wrap their minds around that, but it's the truth.
Especially runners, there's something about that breed of person that runners love to run, and I get that. I get that. You love to run. But there's expiration dates on everything, and you have to kind of take your time and make sure that you're taking care of yourself, taking care of your body as best as possible, so that your legs are with you for the rest of your life and you don't wear those out too. And so strength training, they found over and over again that strength training does not lead to a detriment in race time, that it only improves race time to be strength training. And so making sure that you're really focusing on all parts of your body to help you train better.
And you can structure a training plan to fit all of that in. So it's not just about the running, but the rest and cross training and other exercise that you like to do is all part of that.
Absolutely, which is why running coaches like yourself are so important, because if I was doing it on my own, I might not be able to manage and police myself as well. And so having a running coach is one of the benefits to really making sure that you're doing it the right way and a safe way.
Yeah, it certainly helps to have someone to be accountable to, whether that is a coach or when I was recovering from my injury, I was accountable to you for all of my exercises that I was doing.
Absolutely.
For sure. Okay, let me ask you another question. A lot of people ask about, sort of going back to the feet, about heel strike versus toe strike and like what is best. And I've had some beginners ask me that, and I tend to say that it really doesn't matter. What it is what it is, unless you're having some issue or some injury that you would need to change that. But everybody is a little bit different. I'm not sure how you would respond to that.
That's a great question, and I get that from every single runner that comes in. And what I always tell them is that if you look back at Boston Marathon winners over the past 20 years, you're not going to see 20 of the same type of strike pattern. You're not going to see 20 heel strikers. You're not going to see 20 forefoot strikers. You're going to see a mix. The truth is that our bodies will self-select the most efficient way to do it. And so I am not in the business, and I tell people I'm not in the business to change your strike pattern unless one of two things is happening. Either it's pathologic, so there's an issue, there's pain, or they're coming to me and they say, I want to change my strike pattern to this. And those are the only two times that I really jump in there and try to change a strike pattern. It really does depend. For people that have shin pain, so people that have shin splints or medial tibial stress syndrome, a lot of the times they're heel strikers, and they're constantly using their front muscles of their shin to pull their toes up every single step. And so that's why they're getting that pain. So I may change them to a more midfoot strike pattern. Whereas on the flip side, if they have Achilles tendon pain or calf pain, they may be more of a forefoot strike, and we need to bring them to being more of a midfoot to a rear foot strike to kind of offload their calf. So I think what you said is perfect. I think that's what's absolutely true. There is no standard. There's no ideal running form. However, if it's pathologic, we will try to change it to be a little bit more ergonomic and energy saving, as well as to try to really find out why you're having the pain that you are. And it may be a strike pattern issue that we can change. And one of the things, and one of the things that I was going to ask you, and this kind of plays a role in it too, is cadence. I mean, cadence is a big thing. It's a hot topic right now in running and running rehab. And so I was going to ask you how you describe cadence to your runners, especially your novice runners. And then I'm going to bring that back after you answer, and I'll answer too, of how I utilize it in rehab as well. So why don't you kind of explain a little bit about how you describe cadence?
Yeah, so this is probably the biggest thing that I focus on in a form discussion. Like I go over form, but we spend a lot of time on cadence, which really is how many times your foot strikes the pavement in a minute. And the ideal, I guess, this is debated in the literature, but ideally we strive to get to 180. And a lot of people are a lot less than that, but it's something that you can't change overnight. So, I'll tell people, we strive for 180 and try to get them to see where they're at. And they're like, okay, well, I'm just going to change this. But it takes quite a bit of time to work up to that, maybe months or even years, depending on where you're starting from. So I try to get people to see where they are. Some wearable devices like the Garmin will estimate it and calculate it for you to give you an idea. You could count it in your head or have someone else count. But there are ways to get yourself at a higher cadence, maybe like playing music that has that beat, or a metronome app, something like that. I'm not sure how you advise people to increase it, but those are the couple of pieces of advice I have given to my runners.
Yeah, no, and I think that falls really in line with what we say as therapists. I mean, the ideal for a novice runner is anywhere between 160 and 180 beats per minute, as a general rule of thumb. And like you said, most people are below that. And so what we try to do to make sure that we're not overtraining is that we increase it by about 10%. And so I'll make it easy for myself. I mean, if you're running at 100 beats per minute, which is pretty slow, but if you're running at 100 beats per minute, I'm going to tell somebody, I'd like you to increase by 10%. So I'd like you to be at 110 beats per minute next time we see each other. And so usually I give them that 10% rule so that they don't overtrain. But like you said, it does take a long time to do. And so we tell people there are metronome apps, which I like a lot. And there's also, if you go on Spotify, there are ways and there are playlists that have songs at a certain cadence. And so for people that like to listen to music, it gives them a way to get to that ideal 160 to 180. And what we have found in physical therapy at this point, where the research is and the literature is that increasing cadence really does solve a lot of things that happen down the kinetic chain. And so, and I found that to be absolutely true. So if you work on strength and you work on flexibility and you talk about form, those are all great, but a lot of things can be solved by increasing cadence by about 10%. And that's kind of where the research is right now. And like I said, it's a hot topic right now in therapy. And so, yeah, so I think cadence is a great discussion to have. And most people are a little bit slower than that ideal 160 to 180. But just increasing by 10% can be really fatiguing as well, both mentally and physically. It can be really fatiguing. And so I always warn people about that as well.
Can you increase when you have them increase by 10%, is that over like a period of weeks?
Yeah, it's a couple weeks.
2 to 4 weeks kind of? Oh, okay.
Yes. So it's usually about a 2-week process. I tell people to make sure they're having their rest days. So I tell people usually when we're doing this to never run back-to-back days, to always give themselves a day in between, whether that be a strength day, whether that be an upper body day or a core day or a rest day. But I tell people don't do it 2 days in a row. And by the time I see you next in 2 weeks or so, I want you to be up at a certain cadence level. And so I always tell people about that.
Okay, no, that's great advice. Thank you. Okay, let's see, what other questions have I got for you? Well, we were talking a little bit about strength training, and you alluded to the core. Do you have favorite core workout, or what you usually recommend? I like to do variations of the plank, but
yes. So I really like planks. I think that they're safe, and they can be modified easily as well, either going on knees, going on forearms. I really love to incorporate hip exercises with planks. That's kind of my go-to for a lot of my runners. So being in a side bridge or a side plank and adding leg lifts, these because I did these with you.
Yeah, and the bridges, planks and bridges.
Yes. So side planks with leg raises or side planks with clamshells or forearm planks with hip extensions. I love those. I think they work really well because they're working your core. You're utilizing glutes on both sides. So I really like those for runners. I always like to start with a standing isometric hip external rotation exercise in a figure 4 or in a runner's stance. I really like those because they train your body to activate your core and activate the glutes on both the stance side as well as the swing side. And so this is something that I can definitely give you a picture and you can post on your websites and things like that. I really like those to start because I think they do a good job. And I think one of the things that runners fail to do a lot is to activate their glutes at the appropriate time, especially on the leg that's standing on the ground. Because running itself is a single leg balance exercise. And so being in that single leg stance position and training it that way, I think is really important. And it's often neglected. So I do like to do an isometric, which is your muscles don't change length. So you're pushing against a stable resistance on the on a wall, for example, in a runner's stance, and then working.
Yeah, oh, I would love to have the visual to go along with your explanation, but I love the bridge now, but I didn't used to do them
but yeah.
before I saw you, but yeah, and variations of, yeah, planks, bridges, clamshells, all of that.
Yeah, they're really important. But again, I also like to do single leg balance exercises because it is a single leg stance activity. Running is it's a series of single leg squats essentially. So I like to do those. So I think we talked about a lot of these things. What would you say, for your novice runners, the runners that are coming to you maybe for the first time, what do you find is some of the common mistakes that you see that they're making? And what pieces of advice? I know we kind of talked a little bit about training too quickly, things like that, but are there any other common mistakes that you see or pieces of advice that you have?
Yeah, I think probably training too fast and going too far would be the most common mistake, but also not having appropriate running sneakers is actually very common. So if you can even, get the sneakers out of the way and do that before you even get started, that's probably key. Like some people will go in their closet and find, sneakers that are 10 years old and try to go with that, and they find they're having foot pain and shin pain and knee pain and all sorts of things, and it can be solved by simply getting the right pair of shoes, which is always very nice. But a lot of times I think people just they have great goals, but they go out too fast and then they get very discouraged that they're either not improving or not getting faster, they can't go farther. And I know I'm guilty of this because I started and stopped and started again with running so many times. And that was really why I would say, like, I'm going to do it this time and go out and run, as fast and as far as I could. And, I was probably running like a mile race pace as if I was, 14 years old, and I could not do that in my 20s and 30s. So I think going about it in a little bit more of a methodical way and figuring out where your current fitness is and being okay with that, and being okay if that's slow or if that means run walk or mostly walking, whatever that is, it's a fine place to start because you'll have more success and be able to keep going and progress from there rather than trying to go out too fast from the beginning.
Gotcha.
And quit.
No, that's a good point.
I don't know, what are the common mistakes? You're seeing people at a different stage sometimes by the time they get to you, but I'm not sure if too far too fast is a common one or no.
Yeah, no, I mean, really, my job really does boil down to training errors. That's really what it comes down to. I mean, so the appropriate time to see me as a rehab specialist is really when you're in pain. That's really what it comes down to. When you're not comfortable, when when things are hurting or you hit a wall. I think those are the important things, and I think it's really important to have a team with you, just like any other team sport. And so making sure that you have the right physicians on board, whether you have the right nutritionists, if that's important, if that's something that's needed, rehab specialists, physical therapists, just making sure that you have the team approach, I think is really important. And really it comes down to if you're having pain, that's when you go see a therapist. Well, you go see your physician and then you come see me as a therapist. And the hope is that together, both you, the patient, the referring physician, and then myself, working as a team can get you back to, where you want to be. And transitioning you from me, the therapist, to then you, the running coach, to kind of get you the last step of the way, I think is really what's really important.
I found that sometimes, I'm fairly conservative as far as if something is aching or sore to pull back and, add more rest, take a day off, do more easy pace. But sometimes I have found that people almost need like a permission to take a day off or not follow the training plan that I wrote, like if it's coming from you, then okay, I will pull back on this. But I always try to tell people, speaking from experience, that if you think something is off, it usually is, and it might not be a big deal at the beginning, but if you keep running on that, it will become a big deal. So it's always better to just kind of look inward, take stock of where you're at and what is sore, what aches, what hurts, and kind of go from there, and have a good team around you, like you said, to be able to ask questions and figure out, should I go in and get seen? Do I need to get it worked up or not?
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree.
All right. Well, I don't know. Should we wrap it up? What do you think?
I think that sounds good.
We can always do part 2.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Maybe can you tell everyone how they can find you if they happen to be in your area?
Sure. So if you're in South Carolina, again, I work for Ortho Carolina, which is one of the largest growing orthopedic physician-owned practices in the states of North Carolina and South Carolina. I work through our Rock Hill office. So feel free to reach out to me or to Michelle. We'll post my contact information that feel free to message me, email me, things like that. And then Michelle can also pass your information on if you have any other further questions. And definitely, I think we can do part 2 and really dive a little bit more into different things and different topics that your clients really want to know about. And so I think that would be great.
Yeah, if anybody has any questions, you can feel free to send them my way. And if you have ideas for a part 2, that would be awesome. And yeah, if you want to find me, you can check out the website. It's mindful-marathon.com. And there's a lot of great information in the blog there. And there is if you are a beginner and you want to get started, there is I call it Couch to Confidence walk plan that you can download, and it's just 4 weeks to get you walking consistently. So if you're not sure you want to take the step toward running, it's a great first place to start. All right. So thanks again, Dan, for joining me and answering all these questions, and thank you to everyone listening. Hope you have a good day.
Thank you. You too.